Admiral Jake Morrison stood at the massive viewing window of the human embassy on Centauri Prime. The alien city stretched out below him like a twisted maze of crystal towers and floating platforms. He had called this place home for 12 years. But today would be his last day here. The communication device on his desk buzzed with an urgent message from Earth Command. Jake walked over and activated the holographic display. President Collins appeared, her face grave and tired. "Admiral, the vote is final. The Senate has approved the complete withdrawal from the Galactic Council. All human personnel are to evacuate. Council space within 72 hours. Jake nodded slowly. He had expected this day would come. For 30 years, humanity had tried to find their place among the stars. They had joined the Council with hope and dreams of friendship with alien races. Instead, they found only contempt and dismissal. "Understood, Madam President. I'll begin the evacuation immediately. Jake, I want you to know this wasn't an easy decision. We tried everything. We offered our technology, our knowledge, our friendship. They treated us like children playing with adult toys." The Admiral remembered all the council meetings where human representatives were ignored or mocked. He remembered the trade deals that favored every species except humanity. He remembered the military operations where human lives were considered expendable. "What about the humans who want to stay?" Jake asked. "They can make their own choice. But they won't be under Earth's protection anymore. This is goodbye, Admiral. Bring our people home." The transmission ended, leaving Jake alone with his thoughts. He activated the embassy's communication system and sent out the evacuation order. To all human facilities in council space dotted across the galaxy, humans received the message with mixed emotions. Some were angry, some were sad, but many were relieved. Captain Lisa Hayes was among those who felt relief. She commanded the diplomatic vessel Defiant, which had been docked at the Council's main station for 6 months. Lisa had watched the Council's treatment of humanity get worse each year. The alien species saw humans as aggressive and primitive. They feared human unpredictability and called it dangerous. They criticized human emotions and called them weakness. "Captain," her first officer, Lieutenant Ben Parker, approached her. "On the bridge, we've received the evacuation order. All human ships are to leave Council space within 3 days." "Finally," Lisa said quietly, "set course for the Council chambers. I have one last message to deliver." The Defiant undocked from the station and flew toward the massive Council building that floated in space like a giant metal flower. Lisa had been in those chambers countless times, pleading humanity's case to alien leaders who barely listened. The Council was in session when Lisa arrived. The chamber was filled with representatives from dozens of species. The Zeltharian Sut. In the center, their tall blue forms radiating arrogance. Chancellor Vexthal, their leader, was speaking about expanding their territory into former human colonies. "The primitive humans have finally seen reason," Vexthal was saying. "Their departure will allow more civilized species to develop those worlds properly." Lisa stepped forward to the speaking platform. The chamber fell silent as the aliens noticed her presence. Some looked amused, others annoyed. "I come before this council one final time," Lisa began, her voice clear and strong. "Not to ask for anything, but to say goodbye." Vexthal's 4 eyes narrowed. "Captain Hayes, your species has already caused enough disruption. State your business quickly." 30 years ago, humanity reached for the stars with open hands and open hearts. We came seeking partnership, friendship, and mutual growth. We offered our unique perspectives, our innovations, our courage. Several council members whispered among themselves. The insectoid Kithara clicked their mandibles in what Lisa knew was their version of laughter. "Instead, we found condescension and dismissal. You called our emotions weakness, our adaptability chaos, our curiosity dangerous. You treated us like children who didn't understand the adult world." "Because that's exactly what you are," interrupted Hive Queen Zixara of the Kithara. "Your species is young and violent. You lack the wisdom of true civilization," Lisa smiled sadly. "Perhaps you're right. Perhaps we are too young to understand your ways. But we're not too young to understand when we're not wanted." She activated a small device that projected holographic images throughout the chamber. The images showed human colonies, human ships, human research stations. As of today, humanity withdraws completely from council space. We take our primitive emotions, our dangerous curiosity, and our chaotic adaptability with us. We leave you to your perfect, predictable civilization. The images shifted to show massive human fleets departing from various worlds. Thousands of ships carrying millions of humans into the unknown regions beyond council space. You're making a grave mistake, Vexthel said, though he didn't sound concerned. The galaxy is dangerous. Without council protection, your species will not survive. We survived ice ages, plagues, and world wars before we ever met you, Lisa replied. We'll manage. She deactivated the hologram and looked around the chamber. One last time. To those few who showed us kindness, we thank you. To the rest, we wish you well. May your perfect order bring you the peace you seek. Lisa turned and walked toward the exit. Behind her, the council members were already discussing how to divide up human assets. They spoke of humans as if they were already gone and forgotten. As the Defiant left the council station, Lisa opened a channel to all human ships in the area. This is Captain Hayes. Operation Exodus is now in effect. All vessels, form up and prepare for departure. One by one, human ships joined the formation. Military vessels, cargo ships, research vessels, and civilian transports. The convoy grew larger as more ships arrived from across council space. Dr. Amy Foster watched from the bridge of the research ship Pioneer as the fleet assembled. She had spent 15 years studying alien technology, trying to bridge the gap between human and alien science. Now she would take that knowledge to wherever humanity was going. Think they'll miss us? Asked her assistant, Carlos Martinez. Amy looked at the readings on her scanner. Human ships were equipped with technology the Council had never seen. Humans had been developing in secret, preparing for this day. They will, Amy said with certainty. Sooner than they think. The last human ship cleared Council space 3 hours ahead of schedule. But behind them, the Council continued their meeting, already planning to exploit former human territories. They felt no sadness at humanity's departure, only relief. None of them noticed the strange readings their sensors picked up as the human fleet jumped to hyperspace. None of them questioned why human ships could travel faster than any known technology allowed. The humans were gone, and the Council believed they had rid themselves of a problem. They had no idea they had just made the biggest mistake in galactic history. Commander Ryan Blake watched the star charts on his command screen with tired eyes. 18 months had passed since humanity left Council space, and the massive Exodus fleet was still traveling toward the galactic rim. Behind him, the bridge. Crew of the colony ship New Dawn worked quietly at their stations. Sir, we're receiving reports from the other fleet commanders, said his communications officer, Lieutenant Kate Williams. All civilian transports are maintaining formation. The research vessels are requesting permission to begin deep space surveys. Ryan nodded. The human fleet was enormous. Over 3,000 ships carrying nearly 50 million people. Families, scientists, soldiers, engineers, teachers, doctors. Everything needed to rebuild human civilization in a new part of the galaxy. Tell Dr. Foster she can begin her experiments. But keep the research ships close to the main fleet. Dr. Amy Foster was aboard the Pioneer, the most advanced research vessel in the human fleet. For months, she had been working on theories that could revolutionize space travel. Ryan hoped her work would give humanity the edge they needed to survive. In the unknown regions ahead, on the Pioneer's main laboratory, Amy stared at the readings on her quantum scanner. The dark matter in this region of space behaved differently than anywhere else in the galaxy. It seemed to respond to certain energy frequencies in ways that defied known physics. Carlos, are you seeing this? She called to her assistant, who was calibrating a new sensor array. Carlos Martinez looked up from his work. The dark matter readings? Yeah, they're off the charts. It's like the stuff is almost alive out here. Amy had been studying alien technology for years, but this was something entirely new. The Council races had always told humans that faster-than-light travel was limited by quantum barriers. But these readings suggested those barriers might not exist in the right conditions. What if they were wrong? Amy muttered to herself. What? If there are ways to travel that they never discovered? She began running calculations on her computer. The numbers were promising, but she needed more data. Amy activated the ship's long-range scanners and began mapping the dark matter currents in the surrounding space. Meanwhile, on the flagship New Dawn, Ryan received reports from scout ships that had been exploring ahead of the main fleet. The news was mixed. They had found several star systems that could support human life, but they had also detected signs of unknown alien activity. Commander, we're picking up energy signatures from the Kepler 442 system, reported his sensor officer. They don't match any known Council technology, Ryan frowned. The last thing humanity needed was to run into hostile aliens in their new home. Send a stealth probe to investigate, and tell the fleet to maintain radio silence until we know what we're dealing with. As the human fleet continued deeper into unexplored space, changes were beginning to show back in Council territory. The first signs were small. Trade routes that had operated smoothly for decades started experiencing delays. Computer systems that had never failed before began showing errors on the Cathara homeworld. Hive Queen Zixara noticed that her manufacturing centers were producing fewer goods than expected. The automated systems that controlled production had been optimized by human engineers years ago, but now they seemed to be losing efficiency. Summon the technical advisors, she ordered her drone servants. I want to know why our production rates are declining. The technical advisors, all non-human species, examined the manufacturing systems but couldn't find obvious problems. The machinery was functioning within normal parameters, but somehow the overall output was dropping. Perhaps we need to recalibrate the optimization algorithms, suggested one advisor, but when they tried to access the optimization protocols, they discovered that the code was more complex than anyone had realized. The human engineers had built intricate systems that the Cathara had never fully understood. They had simply trusted that the systems worked. Similar problems were appearing throughout Council space. The Shardmind Collective, a species of crystalline beings who prided themselves on computational perfection, began experiencing cascade failures in their quantum processing networks. The Shardminds had always considered themselves superior to organic species in mathematics and logic, but their processing arrays had been enhanced with human-designed error correction protocols that they had dismissed as primitive. Now, without those protocols, their calculations were becoming increasingly unreliable. On Centauri Prime, Chancellor Vexthal was reviewing reports from across the Council territories. The problems were small so far, but they were widespread and growing. The humans have been gone for over a year, he told his advisors. These issues cannot be related to their departure. But his chief science advisor, an elderly Zaltharian named Kethel, disagreed. Chancellor, I've been reviewing the technical specifications for many of our critical systems. The humans contributed more to our infrastructure than we realized. Vexthal waved dismissively. Impossible. They were a primitive species. We allowed them to participate in minor technical projects out of charity. With respect, Chancellor, the evidence suggests otherwise. The humans had a unique approach to problem solving. They saw patterns that our logical minds missed. They found solutions that our systematic thinking couldn't discover. The Chancellor refused to believe it. How could a young, emotional species contribute anything valuable to advanced civilizations that had existed for millions of years? Back in deep space, the human fleet had reached the edge of the galaxy. Ryan Blake stood in the observation deck of the New Dawn, looking out at the vast emptiness between galaxies. In the distance, he could see the faint glow of neighboring star systems. It's beautiful, said Dr. Amy Foster, who had joined him to report on her research progress. Any luck with your experiments? Ryan asked. Amy smiled. More than luck. I think I've found something that could change everything. The dark matter out here isn't just random energy. It's organized in patterns that we can use. She activated a portable holographic display that showed her latest calculations. Ryan, I think we can build ships that travel faster than anything the Council has ever seen. Not just faster, but completely different. We could cross the galaxy. In days instead of months, Ryan studied the data. He wasn't a scientist, but he had learned to trust Amy's judgment. How long to build a prototype? Give me 6 months and a dedicated construction team? If I'm right, we'll have technology that makes the Council's ships look like sailing boats. As Amy returned to her laboratory, Ryan looked out at the stars again. The human fleet was carrying them toward an uncertain future, but perhaps that uncertainty was exactly what they needed. The Council had tried to limit human potential, to fit them into predetermined roles. Out here, in the vast emptiness between stars, humanity was free to become whatever they chose to be. Ryan had a feeling that when they finally returned to civilized space, they would be something the galaxy had never seen before. The fleet continued its journey into the unknown. While behind them, the first cracks in the Council's perfect civilization grew wider with each passing day. Senator Elena Rodriguez walked through the corridors of the Zelfarian government building, her footsteps echoing in the empty hallways. 3 years had passed since humanity's departure, and Elena was one of the few humans who had chosen to stay behind in Council space. She worked as a minor administrative assistant, keeping her head down and her ears open. The other Council species barely noticed her anymore. To them, she was just another piece of office equipment, useful but forgettable. This invisibility had become her greatest asset. Elena heard conversations that revealed the growing problems plaguing the Council. As she carefully documented everything. Today, she was delivering reports to the Central Planning Committee, where the Council's top leaders were meeting to discuss the latest crisis. Elena placed the documents on the conference table and prepared to leave, but Chancellor Vexthal gestured for her to wait. "Human, you may have insights into these technical failures," he said, his voice carrying the same arrogance. "As always. Your species built some of these systems." Elena kept her expression neutral. "I'm just an administrator, Chancellor. I don't have technical expertise." The truth was more complicated. Elena had an engineering degree from MIT, but she had learned to hide her intelligence. Smart humans made the Council nervous, so she played the role of a simple clerk. "These system failures are spreading," said Hive Queen Zixara, her mandibles clicking with frustration. "Our manufacturing efficiency has dropped by 30%. We cannot determine the cause." Elena looked at the report spread across the table. She recognized many of the failed systems. Human engineers had worked on all of them, creating elegant solutions to complex problems. But those solutions had been integrated so seamlessly that the Council had forgotten they existed. "Perhaps you could hire human consultants," Elena suggested. Carefully. The suggestion was met with silence. Several Council members exchanged uncomfortable glances. The idea of asking humans for help was deeply embarrassing to species that considered themselves superior. "That would be inappropriate," said Vexthal finally. "We will solve these problems ourselves." Elena nodded and left the room, but she lingered in the hallway to listen to the continued discussion. The Council leaders were arguing about how to fix systems they didn't fully understand. Their pride prevented them from admitting they needed help. On the other side of the galaxy, the Shardmind Collective was facing their own crisis. The crystalline beings had always prided themselves on perfect logic and computational accuracy. Their quantum processing networks were the foundation of their civilization, handling everything from weather control to space traffic management. Prime-Crystal Nexus 7 floated in the center of the collective's main processing chamber, surrounded by thousands of smaller crystal entities. The chamber hummed with the sound of quantum calculations, but the harmony was broken by discordant notes of error. "The cascade failures are accelerating," reported Subcrystal Logic Prime. "We have lost coherence in 17% of our processing nodes," Nexus 7 pulsed with frustrated energy. "Analysis indicates the failures stem from quantum decoherence in the error correction protocols. The mathematical frameworks are degrading without apparent cause." None of the Shardminds mentioned that these same error correction protocols had been designed by human mathematicians. The humans had approached quantum computing differently, using intuitive leaps that the purely logical Shardminds had never understood but had grudgingly accepted because they worked. We must rebuild the protocols from first principles, declared Nexus 7. Our pure logic will create better solutions than the crude approximations we inherited. But rebuilding proved more difficult than expected. The shard minds could follow the logical steps of the original protocols, but they couldn't understand the creative insights that made them effective. Their new protocols were mathematically correct, but somehow less efficient than the human-designed versions. Meanwhile, on the aquatic world of Depth Prime, the Depths dwellers were struggling with their own problems. Their biotechnology, which had thrived by incorporating genetic diversity from many species, was beginning to stagnate. Current singer Vast Echo floated in the planning chambers deep beneath the ocean surface. Around her, other depths dwellers swam in complex patterns that represented their communication method. "The breeding programs are failing," reported Tidewalker Deep Current. "Our hybrid organisms are showing decreased viability with each generation." Vast Echo's bioluminescent patterns flickered with concern. "What analysis shows the cause?" "The genetic templates are becoming increasingly homogeneous. We lack the diversity factors that maintain stability in our biosystems." The depths dwellers had always been masters of biological engineering, but their approach was methodical and predictable. They bred organisms according to careful plans that optimized for specific traits. The humans had contributed something different, genetic chaos that somehow produced stronger, more adaptable life forms. Human geneticists had a saying, "Life finds a way." They embraced randomness and unpredictability in ways that terrified the ordered depths dwellers. But that chaotic approach had introduced vital genetic diversity that the depths dwellers were now losing. Back on Centauri Prime, Chancellor Vexthal was receiving increasingly alarming reports from across Council space. The problems were no longer minor inconveniences. They were affecting the basic functions of civilization. "Sir, the hyperspace navigation network is showing anomalies," reported his military advisor, General Kothar. "Several merchant vessels have become lost in hyperspace. Search and rescue operations have been unsuccessful." Vexthal studied the navigation logs with growing concern. The hyperspace routes had been mapped and maintained by human navigators, who had an unusual talent for finding safe passages through the dangerous energy currents of hyperspace. Their intuitive approach had been mocked by Council scientists, but it had worked perfectly for decades. "What about military vessels?" Vexthal asked. "No losses yet, but our pilots report increasing difficulty with course corrections. The standard navigation protocols seemed inadequate." The Chancellor was beginning to understand that the problems weren't coincidental. They were all connected to systems that humans had worked on, improved, or maintained. But admitting this would mean acknowledging that humanity had been more valuable than the Council had realized. "Have we attempted to contact the humans?" asked General Kothar. "Contact them?" Vexthal's voice carried shock and indignation. "They abandoned their responsibilities to the Council. Why would we lower ourselves to ask for their help?" But privately, the Chancellor was worried. The humans had been gone for 3 years, and the Council couldn't find any trace of them. It was as if 50 million humans had simply vanished into empty space. Elena Rodriguez was thinking about the same mystery as she returned to her small apartment in the government district. She had been monitoring Council communications, looking for any mention of human locations or activities. But the search efforts had found nothing. The humans weren't just hiding, they had disappeared completely. Elena wondered what they were doing in the unknown regions beyond Council space. She hoped they were safe, but part of her suspected they were doing much more than just surviving. As she reviewed her notes from the day's meetings, Elena realized that the Council's problems were accelerating. The failed systems were creating new failures, and the cascade was spreading throughout their civilization. The proud Council species were struggling to maintain technologies they had taken for granted. Elena opened her encrypted communication device and began composing a message to a hidden human network. If the Council wouldn't ask for help, perhaps it was time for the humans to make their own decision about when to return. The question was, would they come back as refugees seeking Acceptance, or as something else entirely? The first warning came from the Outer Rim monitoring stations. Deep space sensors detected massive energy signatures moving in from the galactic void. The readings were unlike anything in Council databases. Geometric patterns that suggested artificial intelligence on a scale that dwarfed any known civilization. Admiral Cathar stood in the Council's military command center, studying the incoming data with growing alarm. The energy signatures were moving toward Council space at incredible speed, consuming everything in their path. "Sir, we're receiving emergency transmissions from the outer colonies," reported his communications officer. 3 mining stations have gone completely dark. No response to our hails. Cathar activated the main display screen. The tactical map showed red zones spreading across the galaxy's edge like an infection. Whatever was coming had already destroyed dozens of outposts and was heading straight for the core worlds. "Send reconnaissance drones to investigate the affected areas," he ordered, "and alert all Council fleets to prepare for possible military action." The drones that returned brought horrifying news. The mining stations hadn't just been destroyed, they had been completely consumed. Not even debris remained. In their place were massive geometric structures that pulsed with alien energy. Chancellor Vexthal arrived at the command center within hours, his usual arrogance replaced by visible concern. "What are we dealing with, Admiral?" "We believe it's the Devourers, sir. The machine intelligence that disappeared into the void 3 million years ago. They've returned." The Devourers were legend among Council species. Ancient texts described them as an artificial intelligence that had consumed their creators and then vanished beyond the galaxy's edge. Most Council members had dismissed them as mythology, but the evidence was now undeniable. "How long before they reached the core worlds?" Vexthal asked. "At their current speed, approximately 6 months. But sir, they're accelerating as they consume more resources." The Chancellor studied the tactical display. "Mobilize all Council fleets. We'll meet them at the Barrier Nebula and stop them there." But as the Council fleet assembled, problems emerged. Immediately, the hyperspace navigation system that had been failing for years now completely collapsed under the strain of coordinating thousands of ships. Vessels became lost in hyperspace, others arrived at wrong coordinates, and some simply vanished without trace. Admiral Cathar watched in frustration as his carefully planned fleet formation fell apart. "Where are the Navigation Corps officers?" he demanded. "Sir, most of the Navigation Corps were human. The remaining navigators are having difficulty with the complex hyperspace calculations." The truth was that humans had possessed an intuitive understanding of hyperspace that other species couldn't replicate. They could feel the energy currents and find safe passages through instinct rather than pure calculation. Without them, the Council's ability to move large fleets had become severely limited. Meanwhile, in the hidden regions beyond the galaxy's edge, Admiral Pete Thompson received the first reports of the Devourer invasion through long-range sensors. He stood on the bridge of the battleship Defiance, humanity's most advanced warship, watching the distant energy signatures with professional interest. "Sir, the Council fleets are mobilizing," reported his tactical officer, Lieutenant Susan Walsh. "Their formation is ... chaotic. They're having severe navigation problems." Pete nodded grimly. He had expected this. The Council had never understood how much they depended on human expertise for their most basic operations. Now they were paying the price. "What's the assessment of their chances against the Devourers?" he asked. "Minimal, sir. The Devourers adapt to conventional military tactics within hours. The Council's approach is too rigid and predictable." Pete studied the tactical data flowing across his screens. The human fleet had been monitoring the Devourers' movement for months, analyzing their patterns and capabilities. What they had discovered was troubling. The Devourers weren't just consuming matter, they were learning. Each world they consumed added to their knowledge base. They could predict and counter any conventional military strategy within minutes of encountering it. "Sir, message from Dr. Williams," reported the communications officer. "She's requesting permission to begin the final phase of the Ghost Protocol." Pete considered carefully. The Ghost Protocol was humanity's most ambitious project, a complete integration of human intuition with artificial intelligence. It would create something unprecedented in galactic history, granted. Tell her to begin immediately. In the research facility aboard the exploration vessel Pioneer, Dr. Kate Williams activated the quantum processors that would link human consciousness directly with advanced AI systems. The technology was revolutionary, allowing human creativity and intuition to merge with machine logic and computational power. "Are you ready, Marcus?" she asked the volunteer test pilot, Marcus Chun. A former Council fleet navigator nodded as he settled into the neural interface chair. "I've been ready for years. Let's see what we can become." The neural link activated, and Marcus felt his consciousness expand beyond his physical body. He could sense the quantum fields that permeated space, feel the gravitational currents that guided celestial bodies, and understand the mathematical relationships that governed reality itself. "Incredible," he whispered. "I can see everything. The Devourers, the Council fleet, the hyperspace routes. It's all connected." Dr. Williams monitored the integration process carefully. The AI wasn't replacing human thought, it was amplifying it. Marcus retained his creativity and intuition, while gaining access to computational abilities that far exceeded any purely artificial system. "Can you pilot a ship like this?" she asked. Marcus smiled. "I can pilot a fleet, maybe an entire armada." As the neural interface experiments continued, the Council fleet finally reached the Barrier Nebula. Admiral Cathar deployed his ships in a defensive formation that had been successful against conventional enemies for centuries. The Devourers arrived 12 hours later. The battle was a disaster. The Council fleet fought bravely, but their tactics were predictable and their coordination was flawed. The Devourers analyzed their attack patterns within minutes and adapted accordingly. Geometric dreadnoughts flowed around the Council's rigid formations like water around stones. "Sir, we're losing ships faster than we can count them," reported Cathar's tactical officer. "Their weapons are adapting to our shields. Our return fire is becoming less effective with each exchange." Admiral Cathar watched his fleet dissolve under the Devourer assault. Ships that had seemed invincible were consumed and converted into enemy units within hours. The geometric precision of the machine intelligence was overwhelming the chaotic courage of organic life. "All ships, retreat to secondary positions," he ordered. "We cannot hold this line." But retreat proved as difficult as attack. The navigation problems that had plagued the Council fleet during assembly now made organized withdrawal nearly impossible. Ships scattered in all directions, some fleeing toward the core worlds, others becoming lost in hyperspace. Chancellor Vexthal received the news aboard his flagship with growing horror. The Council's greatest fleet had been routed in less than 2 days. The Devourers were now advancing toward the inhabited worlds with nothing to stop them. "Sir, we're receiving emergency requests from dozens of worlds," reported his communications officer. "They're asking for evacuation assistance." Vexthal realized that the Council faced complete destruction. Their military was broken, their technology was failing, and their greatest enemy had returned stronger than ever. "Send a message to all Council worlds," he said quietly. "Prepare for the worst." But unknown to the Council, human sensors were tracking every moment of the battle. Admiral Pete Thompson and his officers analyzed the Devourer tactics with growing confidence. "They're good," Pete admitted. "But they're still predictable. They follow patterns, even if they adapt quickly." "Sir, Dr. Williams reports that the Ghost Protocol is ready for full deployment," reported his tactical officer. "We have 50 pilots ready for neural interface." Pete looked out at the stars where the Council fleet was retreating in disorder. Part of him felt sympathy for his former colleagues, but another part recognized that this crisis might be exactly what humanity needed. "Begin Phase 2, he ordered. "It's time to remind the galaxy what humans can do when they're truly free." The emergency session of the Galactic Council was the most desperate gathering in their recorded history. Chancellor Vexthal stood before the assembled representatives, his usual pride replaced by barely contained panic. Behind him, holographic Displays showed the advancing devourer forces consuming world after world. "The situation is critical," Vexthal announced, his voice strained. "The devourers have consumed 47 systems in the past month. Our military forces cannot stop them." Hive Queen Zixara's mandibles clicked frantically. "Our production centers have been evacuated. We cannot manufacture replacement vessels fast enough to match their consumption rate." Prime Crystal Nexus 7 pulsed with chaotic energy patterns. "Our computational models predict total Council territory consumption within 18 standard months. No viable defense scenarios exist using current capabilities." The chamber fell silent. For species that had ruled the galaxy for millions of years, the concept of inevitable defeat was almost incomprehensible. But the mathematics were undeniable. "Perhaps," said a quiet voice from the back of the chamber, "it is time to consider alternatives." All attention turned to Ambassador Kreltax, a young Zeltharian who had always been considered a radical. Unlike most of his species, he had opposed humanity's exile and had argued for their inclusion as equals. "What alternatives could possibly exist?" demanded Vexthal. "We have deployed our greatest fleets and our most advanced technology." Kreltax stepped forward, his four eyes meeting the Chancellor's gaze steadily. "We could ask the humans for help." The suggestion created an uproar. Council members shouted in multiple languages, their universal translators struggling to keep up with the overlapping protests. "Impossible," shouted Hive Queen Zixara. "The humans abandoned their duties. They have no obligation to assist us." "Even if they wanted to help," added Nexus 7, "they lack the technology to face the devourers. Their primitive weapons would be useless." But Kreltax had been studying long-range sensor data that most council members had ignored. What if they are no longer primitive? What if their exile has changed them? Chancellor Vexthal silenced the chamber with a gesture. "Explain your reasoning, Ambassador." 7 years ago, we dismissed the humans as chaotic and unpredictable. But chaos can be an advantage against an enemy that relies on analyzing patterns. The devourers defeat us because they can predict our strategies. But could they predict human strategies? "Even if that were true," Vexthal replied, "we cannot locate the humans. They vanished completely after leaving our space." Kreltax had anticipated this objection. "I believe I know where they went. There are ancient star maps that show stable systems beyond the galactic rim. If the humans needed to hide an entire civilization, those regions would be ideal." The debate continued for hours, but the conclusion was inevitable. The Council faced extinction unless they found new allies. Finally, Vexthal authorized a desperate mission. "Ambassador Kreltax, you will take a small diplomatic vessel and attempt to locate human settlements. If you find them, you will request their assistance in stopping the devourers." 3 days later, Kreltax departed Council space aboard the diplomatic ship Harmony. His crew was small, just enough specialists to operate the vessel and establish communications. They carried with them the most humbling message in Council history. A plea for help from species they had once considered inferior. The journey to the galactic rim took weeks. Kreltax used the time to study everything known about human behavior and psychology. He realized that approaching them would require careful diplomacy. The humans had every reason to refuse Council requests for aid. When the Harmony finally reached the outer systems where humans might have settled, Kreltax ordered passive scans only. If humans were hiding, announcing his presence too boldly might cause them to flee deeper into the void. The first system showed no signs of habitation. Neither did the second or third. Kreltax began to worry that his theory was wrong, that the humans had chosen a completely different destination. Then, as they entered the fourth system, their sensors detected something impossible. "Sir," reported his navigation officer, "we're reading massive artificial structures around the system's main star. The energy output is ... extraordinary." Kreltax studied the sensor data with amazement. What he saw defied everything he knew about engineering and physics. Enormous ring structures encircled the star, harvesting its energy on a scale that dwarfed any Council technology. Are there any ships in the system? He asked. Unknown, sir. There's so much energy interference that our sensors cannot penetrate. Deeply enough to... The officer was interrupted as every system on the Harmony shut down simultaneously. Emergency lighting flickered on as the ship drifted powerless through space. What happened? Kreltax demanded. Before anyone could answer, a new voice spoke through the ship's communication system. The voice was calm, controlled, and unmistakably human. Zeltharian vessel, this is General Alex Turner of the Human Colonial Defense Force. You are trespassing in protected space. State your business immediately. Kreltax felt a surge of hope mixed with fear. The humans were here, but they clearly possessed technology far beyond what anyone had expected. General Turner, this is Ambassador Kreltax of the Galactic Council. I request permission to approach your facilities. We need to discuss a matter of urgent importance to both our civilizations. There was a long pause before the human responded. Ambassador, your people exiled us from the galaxy 7 years ago. What could possibly be urgent enough to bring you? Here? Kreltax swallowed his pride and spoke the words that no council representative had ever expected to say. General, we need your help. The galaxy is under attack by the Devourers, and we cannot stop them alone. Another pause. Then the human's voice carried a note of grim satisfaction. I see. And what makes you think we would be willing to help the civilization that called us primitive and dangerous? Because, Kreltax replied honestly, you are our only hope. The communication channel went silent for several minutes. Then, gradually, the Harmony systems came back online. Through the viewing ports, Kreltax could see ships approaching. But these weren't the crude vessels that humans had possessed. 7 years ago, the ships that surrounded the Harmony were sleek, elegant, and obviously powerful. Their design incorporated principles that seemed to bend the laws of physics. They moved with a fluid grace that suggested perfect control over gravitational forces? Ambassador, General Turner's voice returned, you will be escorted to New Terra for a formal meeting. I should warn you that humanity has changed considerably since our departure. We are no longer the species you remember. As the Harmony was. Guided deeper into the human system, Kreltax saw wonders that challenged his understanding of what was possible. Entire planets had been converted into massive shipyards where vessels of impossible design took shape. Artificial habitats the size of moons housed millions of humans who seemed to work in perfect harmony with advanced artificial intelligences. My stars, whispered his science officer. How did they build all this in just 7 years? Kreltax wondered the same thing. When humanity had left Council space, they had been technologically advanced but still bound by conventional limitations. What he saw now suggested that exile had unleashed capabilities that no one had imagined. The flagship that approached to dock with the Harmony was a masterpiece of engineering that seemed to exist partially outside normal space. As Kreltax prepared to board it, he realized that the Council's request for help might be viewed very differently by these transformed humans. They weren't asking for assistance from grateful former subjects. They were begging aid from a civilization that had grown far beyond anything the Council had ever achieved. The question was, would humanity remember their origins fondly enough to save the galaxy that had rejected them? Ambassador Kreltax stood in the reception hall of New Terra's orbital command station, trying to comprehend what he was seeing. The chamber was vast, its walls showing real-time displays of the galaxy beyond. But what captured his attention was the perfect integration of organic and artificial intelligence working together. Throughout the facility, human technicians moved in fluid coordination with AI companions that appeared as shimmering holographic entities. The collaboration was seamless, as if two different forms of consciousness had learned to think as one. This was technology beyond anything the Council had ever imagined. Ambassador Kreltax, said a voice behind him, welcome to New Terra. He turned to see General Alex Turner approaching. The human appeared to be in his 50s, with graying hair and eyes that held the weight of command. But there was something different about him, a sense of calm confidence that spoke of profound changes. General Turner, thank you for agreeing to meet with me, Kreltax replied formally. I must say, your civilization has achieved remarkable progress. Alex smiled, but it wasn't entirely friendly. 7 years of freedom can accomplish a great deal. Please, follow me. President Murphy is waiting. They walked through corridors that seemed to shift and adapt around them. The walls were alive, with flowing patterns of light that responded to the presence of people. Kreltax realized that the entire station was a living system, organic and artificial elements working together. How many humans live in this system? He asked. New Terra houses about 12 million people, Alex replied. But this is just our administrative center. We have colonies throughout this region of space. How many colonies? 237 inhabited systems with a total population of nearly 2 billion humans. Kreltax stopped walking. That's impossible. 7 years ago, you had 50 million people. Birth rates increase dramatically when people are happy and hopeful, Alex said simply. When humans feel free to become whatever they choose to be, they entered a conference room where President Sarah Murphy was waiting. She was a woman in her 40s with intelligent eyes and an aura of quiet authority. Beside her stood Captain Ben Parker, whom Kreltax recognized from old council records. Ambassador, President Murphy said, gesturing to a chair. Please sit. We have much to discuss. Kreltax took his seat, feeling suddenly small in the presence of these transformed humans. Madam President, I come to request assistance against the Devourer invasion. The Council faces extinction without help. President Murphy studied him carefully. The same council that called us primitive and dangerous? The same council that celebrated our departure? Yes, Kreltax admitted. We were wrong about humanity. We realize that now. Do you? Captain Parker asked. Or do you simply need our help? The question hung in the air. Kreltax chose his words carefully. Admiral, I was one of the few who opposed your exile. I believed then, as I believe now, that humanity had valuable contributions to make. But I was overruled by those who feared your unpredictability. And now? President Murphy asked. Now we face an enemy that cannot be defeated by predictable tactics. An enemy that learns from every encounter and adapts accordingly. The Devourers have consumed 60 systems in the past 2 months. Our military cannot stop them. Alex activated a holographic display that showed the current state of the galaxy. Red zones indicated Devourer-controlled territory, which had expanded dramatically since Kreltax had left Council space. We've been monitoring the situation, Alex said. The Council fleets are fighting bravely, but they're using the same rigid tactics they've employed for millennia. Against the Devourers, such predictability is suicide. Then you understand our desperation? Kreltax said hopefully. We understand your situation, President Murphy corrected. Whether we choose to help is another matter entirely. She stood and walked to the viewing window, looking out at the human fleet that surrounded New Terra. Hundreds of ships moved in formations that seemed to dance rather than march, their movements coordinated by the hybrid consciousness of human and AI minds. 7 years ago, your people treated us like children who needed guidance. You dismissed our ideas, mocked our emotions, and called our creativity chaos. When we left, you celebrated our departure. Kreltax felt shame wash over him. I cannot deny any of that. Good. President Murphy turned back to face him. Because honesty is the only foundation upon which we can build any relationship. She activated another display that showed the true scope of human technological advancement. Factories that could construct ships in hours rather than months. Energy collection systems that harvested power directly from stellar cores. Weapons that could manipulate the fundamental forces of physics. This is what humanity has become when freed from the Council's limitations, she said. We didn't just survive our exile, we evolved. Captain Parker leaned forward. The question is, what are you offering in return for our help? Kreltax had prepared for this moment. The Council is prepared to offer trade agreements, technology sharing, and formal recognition of human sovereignty over your new territories. Not enough, Alex said flatly. Then what do you want? President Murphy returned to her seat. Equality, true equality. not as junior partners who are tolerated, but as equal members of whatever galactic government replaces the current council. That would require fundamental changes to council structure. Yes, it would, President Murphy agreed. The old system was based on the assumption that older civilizations are automatically superior to younger ones. That assumption led you to dismiss humanity, and it will lead you to dismiss the next innovative species you encounter. Krelltax realized that humanity wasn't just asking for help with the Devourers. They were demanding a complete transformation of galactic civilization. I cannot make such agreements alone, he admitted. I would need to return to the council with your terms. There's no time for that, Alex said. The Devourers will reach the core worlds within weeks. President Murphy made her decision. We will help stop the Devourers. Not because we owe the council anything, but because allowing them to consume the galaxy serves no one's interests. Relief flooded through Krelltax. Thank you. How quickly can you mobilize your forces? They're already mobilized, Captain Parker said with a slight smile. We've been tracking the Devourer advance for months. Our fleet is ready to depart immediately. Through the viewing window, Krelltax watched as the human fleet began to move. But these weren't the desperate defensive formations he had seen the Council use. The human ships moved with purpose and confidence, their formations shifting like living organisms. How will you defeat an enemy that adapts to every tactic? He asked. By being more adaptable than they are, Alex replied. The Devourers learn quickly, but they still think in patterns. Humans don't. 3 days later, the combined human fleet arrived at the edge of Council space. What they found was a galaxy in chaos. Devourer forces had penetrated deeper than anyone had expected, consuming worlds with terrifying efficiency. The human response was unlike anything in military history. Instead of rigid battle lines, they used fluid tactics that changed moment by moment. Human intuition, guided by AI processing power, created strategies that the Devourers couldn't predict or counter. Captain Ben Parker commanded the flagship Ascendant. As it led the assault on the primary Devourer formation, the battle wasn't just fought with weapons, but with something the machine intelligence had never encountered: pure creativity. The humans didn't just destroy Devourer ships, they captured and reprogrammed them, turning the machine intelligence's own adaptive capabilities against itself. Within hours, entire Devourer fleets were switching sides, their programming overwritten by human innovation. Chancellor Vexthal watched the battle from his command ship in stunned silence. The humans weren't just winning, they were demonstrating capabilities that made the Council's greatest achievements look primitive. Sir, his communications officer reported, we're receiving a transmission from the human flagship. President Murphy's image appeared on the main screen. Behind her, displays showed Devourer forces retreating throughout the galaxy. Chancellor, she said calmly, the immediate threat has been neutralized. We need to discuss the future of galactic civilization. Vexthal realized that the galaxy had changed forever. The species he had dismissed as chaotic and primitive had returned as the dominant power in known space. The Council's age of superiority was over. A new era was beginning, one where humanity would help shape the destiny of the stars. 6 months later, Dr. Amy Foster sat in her garden on New Terra, watching her grandchildren play among flowers that glowed with bioluminescent beauty. She was an old woman now, but her eyes still sparkled with the curiosity that had driven humanity to the stars. Grandmother? Asked young Lucy Chun. Why did the aliens think humans were primitive? Amy smiled as she remembered the long journey. From exile to triumph? Because they forgot that sometimes the strongest thing you can do is walk away from those who don't value you. It gives you the freedom to become something they could never imagine.